Good morning. I'm Senator Cindy Holscher. Welcome to our town hall. It's so good to see all of you. I think this is my 56th town hall since April 5th. Some of you know at the beginning, well, after session was over in April, there were a number of areas across the state where elected officials didn't show up for their town halls.
Right.
And so a number of them reached out to me and said, hey, our electeds aren't showing up. Will you come to a town hall in our area? And I always said yes. And then usually there would be a long pause because they'd go, I'm sorry, did you say yes? I'm not used to hearing that. So it's been great traveling around the state, but even better being back home in Senate District 8, although we're just outside of it, aren't we? A little bit. It's close. It's close. It's hard to find facilities that are open on a Saturday morning that we could utilize. So again, thank you all for being here. We are so lucky. Not only do we have representatives here, we have a couple of special guests. And I will just tell you, Judith and I go way back. We were joking this morning. They both she and the superintendent said that they liked my shirt, and I said, well, it was a challenge this morning trying to figure out what to wear. I figured this was appropriate, but I've done 2 walks with Game On for Kansas Schools from Shawnee to Topeka to bring attention to underfunding of schools under the Brownback experiment. And so I told her, I said, I kind of wanted to wear that shirt, but it doesn't quite fit as well anymore. It's been a few years. So went with the public school t-shirt. So again, thank you, Judith, for being here. She is with Game On for Kansas Schools and has just been a force over the past several years in helping bring attention to underfunding issues as well as continued attacks on our public schools. So glad you're here. And so very excited that we have our new superintendent from Blue Valley.
Thank you.
So originally from the area, right? And then went to Montana and now Wyoming. That's right. Sorry. Wyoming. Yeah.
Same.
For us, it is kind of the same, I guess. But thank you again for your dedication to our schools, and we're glad that you're here. So we will go ahead and get started then. I'm going to let the representatives give a little bit of information first about themselves, and then we'll just turn it right over to our guest. You have people wandering out here?
No.
Okay. We'll turn it over to our guests then after a little bit of background from each of our representatives. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the interim committees that are going on right now. Some interesting stuff happening affecting our schools as well as just in general. Redistricting has been brought up. So we'll talk a little more about that too. So I will hand it over to Linda.
Hi, I'm Representative Linda Featherston. I serve the 16th district, which is the mall to the community college and then on down to the KU Edwards campus. I serve on the education and water committees, and I'm the ranking member on the local government and agriculture committees.
Hi, everyone. I'm Representative Stephanie Sawyer Clayton. I actually used to represent part of Senate 11 before redistricting, but I have been serving you all since my election in 2012. I represent the area that goes from Metcalf to State Line, 83rd to 103rd. Unless you're east of Mission, then it is 95th up north to Somerset after redistricting. So I am the vice chair of our Rules Committee, which is our parliamentary committee. Representative Osman and I both suffer through that one quite a bit. And I am also on the tax committee. I am on the federal and state affairs committee that handles more of the controversial issues. So, guns, marijuana, liquor laws, discrimination, they do it all. And then I am also the ranking minority member on the Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development Committee. Thank you for having me this morning.
Hello, my name is Dan Osman. I'm the representative for District 48. This is my 3rd term here. District 48 goes from about 119th Street to 159th Street and Schweitzer to Metcalf. So it encompasses parts of Senate District 11, parts of Senate District 35 as well. This is my 3rd term in the legislature. I serve on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, Benton State, as well as the ranking member on Judiciary. And I'm also the public policy chair for our caucus as well. So, I try to get involved in a number of different things. And when we talk about interim committees, boy, I've got a lot to talk about there. So.
Pushed a little here. Hi, so I'm Judith Deedy, and I'm happy to be with you today. I was tasked with talking about the new Kansas assessment cut scores. So I appreciate the opportunity. You're going to hear different things from different people. So the right information is that this is a correction of a misalignment, and that is really the truth. So you need to understand that. So I go back, I've been at this for 15 years, and as a parent advocate, but now my youngest kids are seniors in college. This was supposed to be a part-time gig, but the work continues. So back in 2015, my oldest child, had taken the old Kansas assessment, always got 5s. Then we get the new scores, and she's suddenly a 3 on the Kansas assessment. And she went on through the years to, 36 on the Kansas, on the ACT National Merit Commended Scholar. This is not mom brag, okay? And it wasn't that I was upset about my child's assessment scores and that she wasn't as brilliant as I thought she was. I've been an advocate already, and I know what the other side likes to do with test scores. They like to use them to claim that our schools are failing. And I thought, if my kid, this is supposed to say whether or not they're college and career ready. And by the way, she ended up graduating with honors from a highly selective college as well. So I realized at the time, and then it continued to be borne out, this test was not predicting what they said it was supposed to be predicting. But this kid was scoring a 3 and not a 4, because they switched to a 4 metric system. Then the kids who are supposed to be getting 3s are getting 2s, and the kids who are supposed to be getting 2s are getting 1s, and we're going to take a beating on this for the next several years. And that's in fact exactly what has happened. And it was the same for my other 2 kids. And then data started coming in across the state. So it turned out it wasn't just an outlier in my family, it was an outlier for kids across the state. So they realized that we had a problem. And actually backtracking, the cut scores were always designed to be aspirational. They just were never treated as aspirational. So in a state where only about 30% of adults in Kansas have a 4-year college degree, the college readiness score was set at the bottom of level 3 or the top of level 2. And NAEP determined that Kansas had among the highest cut scores in the entire country. And our proficient was tied to NAEP proficient. So I just want to read this to you, because this is another thing you hear a lot in the press is about how, in the national press as well, our kids can't read because they're not proficient. Well, a lot of times they're using NAEP proficient. So it says, this is from a Brookings Institute article from the NAEP proficiency myth. NAEP officials urge that proficient not be interpreted as reflecting grade level work. It is a standard set much higher than that. The highest scoring nations of the world would appear to be mediocre or poor performers if judged by the NAEP proficient standard. Even large numbers of U.S. calculus students fall short. As states consider building benchmarks for student performance into accountability systems, they should not use NAEP proficient or any standard aligned with NAEP proficient as a benchmark. It is an unreasonable expectation, one that ill serves America's students, parents, and teachers, and the effort to improve America's schools. So please continue to remember that, even when you're hearing the national reports about how our kids can't read and do math.
What is NAEP proficient?
So NAEP is a national test. They give it in every state, although they only give it to samplings in each state. And so they have above, and then they have proficient, and then they have basic, and they have below basic. So it's 4 levels. So it's called like the gold standard of standardized tests, but it's it is, but it's not. It's not if you're using its language. And they should have changed the terminology a long time ago, but they haven't. So does that answer your question?
What does it stand for?
National Assessment of Education Progress, I believe. So as data continue to roll in, the Department of Education found large numbers of students scoring in level 2, achieving post-secondary success. And that's even in Kansas, we can't use like military enlistment and some kinds of going to work on the family farm don't appear in our post-secondary data. They're working on a contract with the military so that will start to get that information, but so far those categories don't even count when they're looking at post-secondary success. And Dr. Watson has explained that to the board. So adjusting cut scores is just improving the predictability of this point-in-time assessment to more accurately label student achievement levels. So we also have to acknowledge the increasing use of state assessment scores and the misuse of the performance level results that we've seen over the past decade. So the cut scores were never treated as aspirational, even though Dr. Watson and others repeatedly explained that they were. Just the anti-public education voices and even the press either haven't heard Dr. Watson or just are ignoring what he's saying. So, I did public comment. That's why I'm kind of looking at my notes here. I went to the state board. I sent an email to the state board and I did public comment before the August meeting when they approved their test scores. And I just said, follow the data. So often the other side says follow the data, but here they don't want us to follow the data. So that's, we should follow the data. And not ignore the levels to which our current scores are just being weaponized against our students, our schools, and our districts. So anyway, that's my soapbox on that. I did want to just also, while I have a microphone in my hand, make a plea to everyone to become a champion for your public schools now. So we see the dominoes aligning again, and it's coming down the track. So please, I'm mixing my metaphors here, but please get involved now. It is so much easier to prevent the damage than it is to repair it once it's happened. So please get educated on the issues. You can follow Game On for Kansas Schools. That would be awesome. Facebook, X, Instagram. We have a website. So get informed on the issues and then take that next step and inform your friends, inform your family, and inform your neighbors. So thank you.
Good morning, I'm Gillian Chapman, and I'm the new superintendent of Blue Valley, and I was wondering how long I get to have that title and the grace that comes with it. I was formerly in Shawnee Mission for about 22 years before I left in 2015 to move to Jackson Hole, Wyoming to be the superintendent. So coming back, a lot has changed in 10 years, and then a lot of things haven't changed in 10 years. And it's delightful to be with a group of people that care so much about what's happening in the community to be here today. I'm going to echo a few things before I talk more about the topic I was asked to talk about, but getting involved, asking questions, and voting. And I cannot emphasize that enough. I saw some things in Wyoming that happened with just people not voting, and we ended up with candidates that really weren't in the best interest of, in my opinion, of anybody. So get out, be involved, and vote. And I can see I'm preaching to the choir, so I'll just stop there. Clearly are involved. A couple of things on NAEP. NAEP is the only national assessment that you can really use as a comparison state by state by state. And sometimes I'm asked, well, how did X school do, or how did X school district do? And there's no way to know that. So what happens is all the states are assessed, and third, eighth, and fourth, eighth, and 11th, I think, or something like that. Can't remember the grade levels. But you are just told by the state education department that certain schools have been selected, randomly selected to participate. And it's not all students in those grades, it's a sampling. So then when the assessment is done and completed, then everything gets sent to the NAEP system, and they take all the tests that were given and decide this is how Kansas ranked, or this is how X state ranked. So it's the only national comparison, but it is a small sample size from each state, and it's supposed to be representative of the entire state. So that it's a good assessment for a national comparison. However, if you think about what NAEP is assessing, along with the Kansas assessment program, it's not actually telling you that you can read. That's not at all what's assessing. It's a very, very challenging, just like the Kansas assessments, it's a very challenging test. It is testing way more than if you can actually read. Same thing with math. Math is not probably back in the day. You can remember taking time math tests, and we've all been accustomed to that. And it was strictly a math test. But you have to be a really great reader in order to comprehend the question that they're asking, to break it apart, and apply the math skills that it's seeking. So I'm going to give you all a test. Oh. You don't want to take one.
You just be your mom.
Guess what? I agree with you. And that's what we're doing to our kids. So our kids have common assessments. They have formative assessments. So we'll talk a little bit about each one of those. The common assessment would be something that all third grade teachers in the same building will be assessing their students on to determine what does a student know about the topic that we're working on, this particular unit. So the teachers are gathering and taking, and it doesn't have to be a long test. I mean, I think sometimes we think of a test as a really long test. It doesn't have to be a long test. It's a very short test. And it's to determine what do the students know about the topic that we're getting ready to do. And then the teachers together can analyze that data and say, this is what this group of students is ready for. And here are the strategies. Here's the standard that we're working on. What are the best ways to teach this group of students? And which students already know it and are ready for something different? Which students are on the cusp of getting it? And which students are far from getting it? So that should inform the instruction that's happening on a daily basis. And you'll hear things about professional learning communities, or PLCs. And that is the opportunity for educators to work together, because we know the strongest and best way to move students with student growth is through teacher collective efficacy. And what that means is all the teachers are working together and they believe that the power of collective efficacy and the skills that they have will help a student grow. All students every day should have a little bit of challenge. So we have common assessments, we have formative assessments that are doing the same thing. We're in Blue Valley, we're in the middle of finishing our formative assessments in math and reading. So we know how is this group of students doing right now, and it helps our teachers begin some of that data collection. So we know who needs extra help, who needs extra help to continue their growth. So we already have common assessments, we have formative assessments, and we have tests, we have quizzes, the usual what you all are groaning about. And then at the end of the year, we have the summative assessments, which would be a NAEP, which would be a Kansas assessment, which would be an ACT a little bit. But so our kids are taking a lot of tests. If you're a student that is also learning English, you're also taking a test. You're taking a lot of tests. So when you think about it, a student's day is filled with a lot of assessments. And when I told you I was going to give you a test, if I gave you a little bit longer to think about it, you might have noticed inside your body you might have had some rapid heart rate. You might have noticed that you were shaking a little bit. Maybe your palms got a little bit sweaty. Maybe you said, oh, I have a stomach ache. I really don't want to be here. I didn't know I was doing this. I forgot my homework. I forgot to study. I didn't eat breakfast. That's what our kids are going through every single day. So in my personal opinion, we are over-testing our students, and we are misusing data to tell a story that may or may not exist. There are very few students that actually cannot read, very few. And those students that actually cannot read are students that have a disability and that need a different kind of support. And we hear a lot about mental health in adults, in children. We hear a lot about anxiety. We hear a lot about depression. And if you knew every single day that you were going to have to come to school and have some sort of assessment that told the adults in the room how you were, if you were smart, if you weren't smart, I mean, it's overwhelming for students. And I get it. We have to have some sort of measure to determine that our public funds are going to educate students and to educate all students. But actually, I really feel like when I was a principal, I had so much anxiety because that's when that we really started testing students, not just saying, we tested this grade level or this school and this school is doing well, but we really started looking at every child and making sure every child was growing. And the penalties were so intense if your school wasn't making progress. I think there's some good things in that because we really did start, instead of saying, that the school is a great school, instead we really started looking at every single child, and I believe that is a good thing. However, we are misusing the tests and creating a difficult position for students. Now, I get it. We need some sort of a measure to provide accountability. So the tests in Kansas, and Judith and all of you know way more about it than I do because I'm new. And I asked, we have most school districts have a data and assessment coordinator. So I asked the data and assessment coordinator, and he got so excited that I asked him these questions so I could prepare for today. Tell me about the changes in the Kansas scores. He got so excited. He sent me an 11-page summary. So I put it in AI. And I said, give me the big talking points, like any good educator would do, right? And I'm giving it AI credit. But the crux of the matter is the assessment has changed. The cut scores have changed. Judith explained that way better than I could, way better than Adam could as well. Thank you for that. But what I think we should be looking at is we can't continue to compare or use data inappropriately to tell a story that is just really not accurate. And so 2025 data will not be comparable to anything else. And that's frustrating as an educator as well, because I want to know, especially in my first year in Blue Valley, I want to know, am I making the right leadership moves? Am I investing enough in collective efficacy? Because that truly is, based on John Hattie's research, the number one predictor of student success is teacher collective efficacy. So if that is the number one predictor of student growth and success, we are putting our funds in the wrong places. We need to be putting our funds in teacher support and training and time together and supporting them. I also firmly believe that just as all of you groaned when I said you were going to be taking a test, we are all so much more than the results of one test and how I was feeling on one day. And I don't want to be judged by that. I'm not a good test taker. I have two daughters. One is, they're both doing fine. but one is an amazing test taker. And when we moved to Wyoming, all 11th graders take the ACT as part of their state assessment. Disabled, non-English speakers, doesn't matter, they all take it. My daughter comes home from school and she said, "Oh, I think our ACT results are posted. I should look at that. I don't even know how to get into that." So she opens it. She goes, "Is a 36 good?" And meanwhile, my other daughter is 2 years older, took the ACT like 72 times, and every time she took it, it went down. And they're both amazing, healthy, smart, capable, but knew that I wasn't over the top about their grades. I wasn't over the top about their test scores. There was very little pressure. And so I'm proud that I wasn't putting that kind of pressure on them and they weren't realizing it, because if my older daughter took that measure of her Kansas assessments, because she did graduate in Kansas, or her ACT, her self-worth would be in the toilet, and mine would be too. I remember taking the, oh my gosh, the name just left me. Iowa test at basic school, yes. I had just moved to Kansas from Georgia. I was a third grader, and I remember, and I was just, it was the worst experience, but that whole third grade year was a terrible experience because of how the teacher made me feel. And I could not do that timed math test and shamed me every single time. So I finally, I missed school like my parents figured out I would get sick, I wouldn't go to school. I had so much dread and anxiety about everything, and being a third grader, and I couldn't ever pass it. So that meant you missed recess and all the things. I still see that chart in my mind and I start to panic. I had flashcards. Thank you. I know I'm not alone. I studied all the time. I would miss 9 days of school essentially, and my parents had figured out that on the 10th day is when you got called in for truancy. So then I'd go back for the 10th day and then I'd skip again. So third grade was a disaster for me. I finally got smart and cheated on the timed assessment test, the multiplication table. You had 1 minute to do like 2,000. And I turned it in, and the teacher with her megaphone in front of the class, "Finally, you got it done. And it looks like most of them are right." And she said, "Oh, you finally figured it out." And I was like, "Actually, no, I cheated." So I get sent to the principal's office, and thankfully the fire alarm got pulled away to the principal's office, and then they forgot about it. And so, I had so much anxiety. I immediately went home and told my parents what I'd done, because I was throwing up. I was afraid I was going to get in trouble. It was wrecking me. It was wrecking me, and I hate that for our kids. So I don't want that to be a part of the experience. I want our kids to fail forward. I want our kids to know that every day is just a little bit too hard, and they're going to be fine, because our teachers and our staff that we have hired and recruited and retained and supported, we want them to leap like there's a net and know that we are there catching them, because I make mistakes every single day. And if I thought that at some point it was going to be a career-ending mistake, I would be really reticent to take a risk to do anything. Anything. Nobody likes to do something they're not good at. And I had the honor to interview some students, and they were talking about the things that they love about school, and they hope I don't change. And it was just such an incredible thing. Not one of them said, "I hope you don't change how hard it is." Not one of them said, "I hope you don't change." They all said, "We love our schools. We love our music classes. We love our They were calling out the music classes. Library, I love to go to the library. And when I said, what's your favorite thing? Well, they loved recess, they loved playing. And then, by the time they're in a senior year or they're high school students, they're all like, but I gotta take all these classes. I am so focused on my GPA. I'm so focused on taking the right classes and getting good scores so I can get into college. And that's wonderful. I think we are putting our eggs in the wrong basket. And I know I'm kind of way off topic in terms of the changes in the Kansas assessment program and cut scores. I just want to remind everybody to think about the child you were. Think about the child or children that are supporting in our community. Blue Valley is going to be amazing. Shawnee Mission is going to be amazing on the test scores. All of our schools are going to be just fine because our districts are really fantastic. We have nothing to worry about in terms of testing. What we need to be worried about are we developing a whole child? Are we developing the kind of person that we want in our communities to give back? And I worry about that part. I worry that we're kind of doing some harm in our efforts to hold schools accountable. If all the schools in the country were as great as the ones in Johnson County, in Kansas, we wouldn't have questions or concerns about vouchers and any of those things. Instead, we'd have people saying, our schools are amazing, and that's what we need. We need all of you to continue to be mavens wearing your I Love Public Schools. It's I'm not an I went to a private school at the end. I was the deal breaker for my brother. He was suffering in public schools. He could hardly read. He was 6'6", and Barstow got a hold of my parents at an AAU basketball tournament and said, we want to win the state championship. We're putting together a state championship basketball team. We want your son. So my mom was a public school teacher by then, and she said, I can't have my kids in two different districts, so if you want him, you have to have her. So they said, well, what does she do? So I'd been cut from the cheerleading squad in 7th grade when I was in public school. So my parents were like, well, she doesn't cheerlead, but she's kind of tall and I think she's kind of smart. So I was the deal breaker, and it wasn't a fine experience for me. So I'm not a public or private school hater at all. I think it's wonderful that we had choices and options in our communities, and they are all fantastic. I wish it was that way across the country. One more piece of nugget of information that I think is helpful. When people across the country, and you'll hear this data a lot from politicians, when people across the country are interviewed about public schools and their feelings about public schools, if you're thinking in general about public schools across the nation, you might say, they're not so good. If you are a grandparent and you're engaged with your students, your grandchildren's school, and maybe you live in a different state, you might say, I don't know about the ones here, but my grandkids, they're in a great school. If you're a parent or a student, or you work in a school, all the time, it's almost 100% satisfaction about and trust in the local public school, in the principal, in the teachers. If you are engaged and you know your public school, where your kids are, people are happy. People are satisfied with that. It's when you ask the question about nationally, and you're really weighing in on something I don't know about. I mean, I don't know how the schools are in other places. I just know how they are in this community, and we are going to be fine. The cut scores on the Kansas assessment, they could put them anywhere, and we're going to be just fine in this community. But we cannot continue to compare 2025 data to the previous assessments, because you're basically comparing an apple with an orange. And I just don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we're talking about children, and we're talking about their future. And every single one of our students, no matter what their personal family challenges might be, or their their cognitive challenges or physical challenges might be, they all have potential. They all can grow and learn, and that is our job to help them do that. And to me, I hope none of my board members are here, but I really don't care how the students do on this state assessment. That's not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at something completely different, and I'm proud of that. I don't think, actually, I'm confident that our school board wouldn't be too alarmed. That said, we will continue to focus and do what we can to educate every single student that comes our way and for them to grow just a little bit more every single day. I think that's what Andy Reid did when he took over. I think the Eagles one year, they lost all, and I think it was just the next year that they won the Super Bowl. And when he was interviewed, he said, I just want us every practice, every game to get just a little bit more, get a little bit better. I want us to improve and improve and improve. That's the mentality that I want for our kids and for our school district. I want every day to be just a little bit too hard. And for a student to know, I'm going to try this and I might not get it yet, but I'm going to get it. And eventually I'm going to get it. And just like we all were potty trained or learned to walk or whatever at a different schedule, it's the same thing with our students. And it's with the support of our dedicated staff that's going to get them there. So if you want to ask a specific question about the Kansas assessment cut scores, ask her. Or I can get you, I do have a lot of information I could share about that. But I think Judith did such a nice job of reviewing it. I just wanted to caution that the 2025 scores are not going to be comparable to the past.
Well, actually, they're going to do correlation tables. So I don't know how good they'll be, but they have promised that they're going to do some kind of chart that will let you compare this year and last.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Brilliant. Thank you for helping us all feel a little more human in terms of experience with test taking, and we may have relived a little trauma there. but like I said, no, thank you, like I said, for helping us all feel a little more human in that regard. I do want to ask, do we have current or former teachers joining us today? Please raise your hand. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That is the whole reason I ran for the legislature in the first place. When my kids got into school, the Brownback experiment was happening. We were seeing all of these massive cuts happening. And then one weekend, some of you have heard this story, my oldest daughter and I, she was about 10 or 12 at the time, were at Target and we saw one of her teachers working on the weekend. And she asked us, she's like, why is my teacher working a second job after working all week long at school? She has a family. And I told her, I said, we're in a budget crisis. My guess is she can't pay all of her bills with just teaching alone. And I kid you not, she looked at me and she said, you go fix that. So, my own representative at the time was leading the charge on destroying our public schools, so decided to run against her and sent a 3-term incumbent packing after that election. And then, thank you can clap for that. And then from there, myself and Representative Clayton co-founded the Women's Bipartisan Caucus, which got legislators to sit down and hammer out a plan in terms of what to do to end the experiment. And from that, we formulated the plan that ended the Brownback experiment. So hats off again to you, Stephanie. So I'm kind of like Judith. I kind of was like, okay, well, we did this. We ended the experiment. We got better revenues. We got better funding for our schools. It should be done, right?
Yeah, right.
Unfortunately, every year the extremists in the legislature have tried to restart the experiment in some form or fashion, and every year there are attacks against our public schools. So while for some of us we thought maybe this would be a short-term thing, it has ended up being a lot longer than we anticipated, and those assaults keep coming. So we have to be ready. We have to vote, as Dr. Chapman pointed out. this is not a time to rest easy by any means, and our schools are in such a precarious position because of the supermajority of extremists working to destroy it. So I do want to take a couple minutes and see, if we have some questions out here for our guests today, and then we'll go ahead.
I did promise our guests they would be done by 10.
Okay.
So if they don't get to all your questions, we'll write them down. We can try to answer them ourselves. But I did make that promise. I would like to stick by that.
Okay, excellent. All right, so in the very back, we have a question.
Thank you, Cindy. I've worked in all three districts, and it's just so delightful to hear the new superintendent of Blue Valley where I live. Just thrilled with your attitude, for your experience, and your knowledge. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is kind of a naive question as a retired educator. NAEP was not on my radar screen. I was an elementary librarian, and so while I gave up my library to testing often, I just wasn't paying attention to that. I just Googled it real quickly, and it was started in 1969, and now that I'm learning from Judith that it was weaponized, it's being weaponized now. Was the original intent of NAEP good and it's just devolved, or the current political situation is changing the intent of it? Can either one of you address how NAEP is now being weaponized, and maybe it was good originally? I don't know.
I don't know exactly when it was formed, what the intent was, but at least very quickly after it was formed, this was part of the first kind of attack on public education, which goes back to our nation at risk.
Yes.
And so we've kind of been fighting this since the beginning. And so, obviously they could have, over these last years, adjusted. We know it's not accurate. There are so many reports saying proficient is a very high level. And the fact that they haven't gone back and fixed it, I think tells us that there is some, at least low-level intent to use this to continue to paint a not complimentary picture of public education.
Thank you.
If NAEP is bad, why use it? I mean, who forces you to use it, and can they be held accountable so that they fix it?
I believe it's a federal requirement. So
Is there an education department?
I think this is one of the ones they would actually stick with. I believe there's some federal funding tied to taking it. And, it can be useful, right? It can be, if you use it as a very big picture to look at very broad national trends, it can be some use. As we say, it's not that all standardized testing is bad. It's just that could you just use it the way it's supposed to?
Yeah.
Could you, we're seeing some changes in reading curricula across the country. If we see that scores start creeping up, then maybe that shows us that, hey, keep doing that. That's the kind of thing it's supposed to be used for. It's not a micro level. Actually, it turns out most states are scoring very similarly. You'll see headlines, Kansas went down 2 points, on a national, it's not a micro level test. It's a grand picture test, and it just keeps getting misused. So I'm not saying we have to pitch NAEP. I really do wish they would have changed the terminology, or at least that everyone in this room, next time you'll see it on the national news, 60% of Kansas or national kids can't read at grade level, and they're using NAEP. It's wrong. It's just flat out wrong. It's what it should be used for and what it's getting used for instead. And just be enlightened now and spread that enlightenment.
Another question, Rick?
Just because I'm not an educator, and I think I'm getting that NAEP is to understand how many of the kids can go to college and kick butt that way. Because people don't do well on NAEP, that they can't read, write, and do arithmetic, and those are two different things. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, so NAEP isn't really strictly designed to correlate to college readiness or whatever. It just is one test that you can just compare year to year across the country. So, I mean, that's just kind of like understanding it's like a baseline, and you see things go up and you see things go down. We saw it drop after COVID, not a big shock, and then people are like, why didn't it magically bump back the next year? Well, because it's kids we're talking about. You don't just magically wave a magic wand and pretend they had last year as normal, or that they didn't have fatalities in their family. Like, it takes time for things to change. So you just have to have a broader perspective of it and not to put too many eggs in that basket. So, yeah.
If I were to give you a test today, we all know how you feel about it, and I said, don't worry about it, it doesn't matter. No one is ever gonna know how you did. No one is gonna be able to tie it back to your school or your district. This is just for the national level. How would you do? Would you take it seriously? Maybe not. Maybe you'd give it a go just to see what it was like. In my previous district, number one, very similar to Blue Valley, number one district in the state, nearly 98% of our students graduated from high school, and which is phenomenal when 50% of them were just learning English for the first time. So it was tremendous data. Highest ACT in the state, all 11th graders took the ACT no matter what. So that was also really great. And some of the lowest they called it Y-top scores for 9th and 10th grade. So I asked the 9th and 10th graders, what's the deal? How do you go from, they weren't lowest, but they didn't at all compare to their ACT data that they took just a year later. What's the deal with 9th and 10th grade Y-top? Why are you not doing a good job with it? And they were like, it doesn't count for anything. The teachers aren't using it for anything. There's no reason. And I've been taking them since 3rd grade, and I've had enough. I'm more focused on taking AP classes and doing well in my current classes and prepping for the ACT, because those matter. The Y-top do not matter. And I am a little concerned. I think my kids probably took the NAEP at some point in their experience, but I'm a little concerned that some students across the country don't really take NAEP all that seriously. It's one more test they have to do, and if I was a kid, I'd rather sit in a class than take a test. And we don't get to choose the kids that take it. So
same for Kansas assessment.
Yes.
Really. We see the older they do, they start doing less well. How much is that they're doing less well, and how much is that by this time they're savvy? And actually, Dr. Watson has said that also in the lower grades, they're really connected to their teacher, and they want to do well for their teacher. And then by the time they're in upper grades, they don't have a single teacher. So they don't have that kind of feeling of like, oh, I need to do this for them. There's a lot that goes into these things, which makes it so hard to make too much of them. Denise?
I want to reiterate, as a parent, all my kids, when it was test time, I told them that. I don't care how you do on these tests. That doesn't matter to me. ACT, SAT, PSAT, those are the things I want you to go to bed early and have a good breakfast for. So I wonder if I'm understanding correctly, the test scores that we're seeing, these big headlines on their social media posts that, a certain percentage of Kansas 3rd graders can't read, that's the NAEP score. That's the state assessment. And they changed the guidelines for where your test score falls. So it appears that more of our kids aren't doing at grade level, even though they're still doing the same that they were, they just changed the assessment.
Yeah, so before 2015, we had one Kansas assessment, and then it changed in 2015, and all of a sudden, it was a much different cut scores. So this next year, they've got new scores again. So hopefully, and I will say too, I still think they're a little aspirational from what I've seen. I still think that where they set the level 3 cutoff is still a little high. But anyway, and they never cite their data, right? So sometimes I can just tell by the stats of, they're using NAEP or, they're using Kansas assessment. But they will use either one. And, like Moms for Liberty, I've seen their little postcards with that, they can't read and it's 60%. So I'm like, oh, if they're looking at Blue Valley, okay, so then that's,
60% of Blue Valley kids can't read.
yeah,
Because that makes total sense.
that makes total sense.
So is that the map testing? It's like, my granddaughter in Shawnee Mission does map testing. Is that the state assessment or is that
No,
another?
that's just another assessment. And that was like another thing that showed me, because that was another one where my kid did very well on math and then not well on the Kansas assessment. So it's like another data point that just shows the Kansas assessment was way off of every other assessment.
So MAP stands for Measures of Academic Progress, and it's a formative assessment, and it's supposed to help the teacher and the leadership team accurately predict how a student might do on the summative state assessment. Sometimes they're in strong correlation, sometimes they're not. But if the student takes this diagnostic tool, MAP, it's on the computer, doesn't take half a day. Kansas assessments take a huge amount of time, and then it's a change in their schedule and all those things. But the MAP assessment doesn't take that long. However, it may or may not correlate, but the purpose of it is for the teacher to say, okay, this student scored, below where I thought they should be. Here are some interventions, and they can actually diagnose and figure out this is the area that they're struggling in. So then, okay, if you're struggling in understanding slope or whatever, then we can do some interventions. And then hopefully, if we do these interventions and they're targeted and we do them with fidelity, then we can predict that the student will have mastered that concept by the time the summative assessment comes around. So MAP is a diagnostic tool.
Oh, one more? I've got a person here.
You're
Making me a liar.
What's that?
You're
I'm
making me a
fine.
liar.
Okay, very fast there.
You mentioned creating the whole person in the school. That's what I'm concerned about. And what can schools do? What can we all do?
All right, and let me get Jennifer's question. We'll do it that way and then you can answer both.
Okay.
Okay. So first of all, I want to thank the legislators here. I've lived in this community since 2001. That's when we built our home. We have not had a town hall in Senate 11 with open questions from the audience since early 2020, when Senator John Skubal and Representative Jan Kessinger, who's now president of the school board, hosted monthly town halls at Leawood City Hall, if anyone remembers that. So I want to thank you. I mean, Dan is here in Senate 11 partially, but I want to thank you for coming here, first of all. And it's a shame that the people we've sent to Topeka from this area do not have the courage to come before the public. So that was my statement on that. And then I just have a general question for Dr. Chapman, but also Judith from a Game On perspective. You're presenting so much good information here, Dr. Chapman, and you're couching the test scores and whatnot in this very informative view. I wondered, number one, will the district be addressing that with its patrons more aggressively? Because I have had a child in Blue Valley School since 2002, and I still have a high schooler. I know that 40 to 60% of our children, it's wrong. They can't read. I mean, this is crazy. And I'm so tired of the weaponization of scores, and I'm concerned. I don't necessarily always see the district really out in front with the good story necessarily. Mm-hmm. And then dovetailing on that, so will we be doing more of that, or will that be a priority? And also, Judith, from a Game On perspective, conveying this information. I mean, I know you try to do it very well, but that, and also the fact that the ACT used to be a self-selective test among students in any Kansas school district, but now our districts administer it as a
course of, I think the state pays for it in February or so of junior year. So a large body of students now take the ACT. Those scores have gone down, of course. That's a test you prepare for, and that is being weaponized. I'm just so tired of the weaponization. So generally, I wondered if you could both speak to what your plans are for that. And again, thank you to these legislators for hosting today.
All right, so you got 2 questions from Sarah and Jennifer.
Yes, I think you're better on the whole child
Okay.
thing. So I mean, we have the receipts. So some of what I would ask this audience to do is just to make sure, I've done door knocking for school board candidates or legislative candidates, and I say, I've got kids in public schools, they're doing great. I'm so relieved to hear that. A lot of our community members, they want to believe what's right, but they're getting a lot of information, and the other side is so funded, and they are so out there. Like, I'm a volunteer. Kansas Policy Institute has paid staff that their job is to go around bashing our public schools. So we need to grassroots it. We need to, I'll keep sending it out on social media, but do op-eds for our local newspapers. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends. You hear a person say something disparaging about our public schools, call them on it, politely, but don't let it go unanswered. The cavalry isn't coming, the cavalry is us. And you need to internalize that.
I would echo that. If you hear something, question it, and then say, why don't you reach out to the new superintendent? She doesn't know that she doesn't have to answer all those. No, I'm kidding. I'm very accessible, and I think it's really important that people are asking and answering questions. So I always get back to people in a timely manner. It's kind of who I am, right or wrong. In terms of the whole child, I think it's really important. Some kids don't come to school with the kind of background and upbringing that I had, and not everything was sunshine and rainbows and all those things. But I had breakfast most days, so we're really working hard at helping students love to come to school, know that they're safe at school, and it's hard to, I can't guarantee that. I wish I could. But I know that we have the people's most important person in their life is in our care. And I don't ever take that for granted. And I really encourage our staff, and I know in Blue Valley, I've been in, I think, almost all of the classrooms already. And I've been really out and about. And I know our staff cares so deeply for our students and for the community. So I'm not worried about that part. I just want to make sure that parents and families have what they need for their student to feel safe and to know that they're supported, and families there's a whole team, a cavalry in our community and our schools. We do spend some time talking with students about how do you develop grit and perseverance and work through some things. For me, almost every time that I'm working with students or in a small group setting, we spend the first 30 seconds to 1 minute talking about what are your strategies when you're a little bit nervous? What's going through your body when you're getting ready to step up to the plate to swing that bat? What's going through your body? Have you noticed that? And we'll spend a minute just doing some deep breathing and noticing how we feel afterwards. And I think that is a really powerful tool that I wish someone had taught me. So just knowing how to calm yourself. And I think it's important for adults. A dysregulated adult cannot help a dysregulated child. So it's good for our staff. In Blue Valley, we have an entire wellness department that is solely focused on taking care of the needs of staff. And I have been so impressed with the benefits and the opportunities in Blue Valley, that district has always, I can't claim credit for it, but I have been blown away by the resources that they are putting into each and every staff member to ensure that not only are they great at whatever their role and function is, but they have support that they need when, you know, a tragedy strikes or just, you know, having a child or a sick child or the things that I used to worry about when my kids were little and being a single parent and I had a sick days, what am I gonna do? That's not a concern in Blue Valley. Our folks are taken care of. And when those things are taken care of, then you can focus on the whole child a lot easier. You can focus on doing your job. So I think that is a critical piece of stepping in, but not overstepping the bounds of parenting. Parents are the number one advocate for their child and the best person. They know their child best, but they should also know that the staff are supporting their child and care for their child just in the same way. So I'm hoping we can, for some people that may have lost trust in that, I hope we can restore that trust because I do believe it's true.
Thank you so much. Round of applause for our guests. Thank you. I'm quite sure if there are additional questions, you can reach out to either of our guests, and maybe something around, I don't know. So we promised you could get on out of here if you want to. So again, thank you so much. Thank you for the work you do. You know, you both said something in there that we got to be talking to our neighbors, talking to our friends and neighbors about our schools. And, you know, I will tell you, we got to be talking to them about politics in general. We have lived, it feels like, under the past 2 or 3 decades with this unwritten rule of you don't talk religion and you don't talk politics. But you know what? The other side has been talking a lot of politics, and they're pretty far ahead of us. So my message then is be a little bolder, be a little braver, and talk about these issues. I'm not telling you to go for controversial things, but you know, schools. Everybody cares about our schools, honestly. Everybody out there cares about roads and highways. Talk to your friends and neighbors about those issues and the role the legislature plays in that. We make so many decisions that affect your day-to-day life. That people really should be more focused on the work that happens there. So again, thank you both. And being a little bolder and braver, I will tell you, after COVID, we lost a lot of great teachers. The legislature is in session from January to May. Like I said, we lost a lot of great teachers. I saw a number of my friends who were educators covering 2 and 3 classrooms in that time period. So again, in being a little bolder and braver, I went out and got my sub-license because I couldn't stand to see my friends covering so many classes. It was supposed to just be in that off session. I was gonna go like 2 or 3 days a week. It ended up being 5 days a week because the demand was so great. And so that has only reaffirmed my commitment, my gratitude to the work that our teachers do. And I will tell you that gratitude deepens anytime I teach middle school. Yeah, I usually get home at the end of the day going, oh, what was I thinking, middle schoolers? But again, thank you so much. So I think what we'll do now is have each of our representatives take, 4 or 5 minutes to talk about your interim committees, major things that are happening there, and then we'll open it up for questions in terms of not just interim committees, but other things on your mind in terms of elections, the legislature, and other issues. So very
I do have to run, but my business cards are up here, and let me know how I can help you all. Thank you.
So said, I'm Dan Osman, and there's 2 interim committees that I'm on. One is on interim committee for financial institutions, and so we're dealing with a topic that it can get a little boring, but it's there's a particular topic that we're dealing with called TEPI, which is a thing that we created about 4 or 5 years ago. It's exclusive to the state of Kansas. And in theory, it was supposed to do quite a lot, which is bring business into the state of Kansas. It was supposed to be a method that people could use large items and objects as sort of collateral, and then you could use it as a high-end pawn shop, but then they use that collateral then to like reinvest it back into communities. This is, on paper, pretty good idea, I suppose, but in reality, we've got a company that is going through a massive upheaval at the moment. They lost their original CEO and founder. Their stock has tanked from about $64 when it opened to around 32 cents at the moment. So we're in the process of trying to figure out where we go from here and how we better regulate this. So there's going to be another meeting on that. We've had several meetings over the last couple of years, but there'll probably be another meeting about October as we try to figure out how we deal with the regulations. The other one that I'm on is the Special Committee on Governmental Oversight. I call it the House Doge Committee. And there's good and bad things that are happening with it. The bad, I would say, the very first committee meeting that we had was on SNAP benefits. And I'm trying to figure out, you always try to go into these meetings figuring out, okay, what's the ulterior motive? How are they trying to attack it? And we're gonna have another meeting on it probably in another month or two. I don't know quite what they're going to do because in theory, on interim committees, you're not able to actually affect change and introduce legislation. All of that comes in January, but I'm waiting for the shoe to drop on what they're going to do with SNAP benefits this year. So be on the lookout for that. I am certainly. The other part of it that we're dealing with is regulations on the nursing board, and we're still in the middle of it. Actually, I could see that there are some good things that we might come out of it with, and I'm talking with the nursing board next week. And we're going to go back into session or into another committee in about 2 weeks from now. The issue here that we're dealing with is that in a with nursing, if you have to renew your license every single year, and if you are late on your license renewal, it is considered by law and by their interpretation to be unprofessional conduct, which then they have to go before a tribunal, maybe hire an attorney. There's attorneys on the other side, and they have to stop their practice, their primary practice, while they sort through this issue. And you can be 1 day late, and you could go through this process. Now, I don't want to hash through all the different parameters of it, but I'll tell you this. So I'm an attorney, and I've occasionally been late in filing my licensure. And they slap a $50 fee on me, and I go, why did you have to pay the extra $50? But I write a check and I go on with my life. And I guess the question that I'm going to ask the nursing board is, why can't we have that sort of implementation here? We have a shortage of nursing staff, and maybe we can find a better use of everybody's time. So stay tuned. Let's find out. Thank you.
Hey everyone, again, thank you for having me this morning. I wanted to speak to something that I heard from Jennifer earlier. She was praising us for having a town hall, and while I appreciate the compliment, a town hall is the low bar, dead bare minimum behavior of a politician. You guys are paying our salaries willingly or unwillingly. You can't get out of paying taxes. That money goes to us to make sure that we do our job. It gives us benefits. I have health insurance because of the taxes that you pay. I am grateful to you for that. And again, I'm happy and honored to be able to have the opportunity to show up and take your questions. I have been participating in something that the Kansas House Democratic Caucus has been doing. It's been called our Fight Back Tour. We have been going all over the state, having town halls, and but again, bare minimum behavior. It has been a wonderful opportunity for me as a legislator because, I've been representing this portion of Johnson County for 13 years now, or I'm in my 13th year. Hopefully, again, it's a bad luck number. I hope I make it out alive. But But it's been a wonderful opportunity to hear what people across the state are concerned about. What has really struck me has been a lot of the similarities that I have been hearing, in particular regarding tax policy. I know that people think tax policy is boring. I don't care. It is the most important thing. And I remember when I first took office, it was right after the Brownback experiment had been implemented. People were not really starting to feel the main hurt. I really started seeing a backlash towards that in 2014 and again in 2016. And this is because government is like air conditioning. You do not notice when it's working. You notice when it breaks. And you know, we start getting pretty cranky. Now, the unfortunate thing that we're noticing here is that things are still kind of humming along pretty nicely in Kansas because we did a partial reversal of the Brownback tax experiment. Your sales taxes are still insanely high. I voted against raising those sales taxes a number of times because what happened was that with the Brownback plan, they drastically cut income tax, which I have literally had no constituent ever come up to me and say, I pay too much Kansas income tax. No, what I hear about is people saying they pay too much in sales tax because you do, and that you pay too much in property tax because you also do. Residential property tax and sales tax are too high. You are footing the bill for government, and that is a huge problem. A lot of the education discussion that we heard earlier and the way that a lot of folks are gaslighting us into believing that our public school system is broken, that is something that we've been putting up with for years, because what will happen is then people will actively break something and say, oh, it's broken. Yeah, no kidding, because you weren't paying for it. You've been attacking teachers, and then a lot of these people will attack teachers, attack school systems. Part of the reason why they want to break public schools is to make it impossible for us to be able to provide a better life for our children with the tax dollars that we are paying. And of course, it makes a lot of sense. When I first got elected, I never thought this, but now I've realized that the reason why they do that is that if they start breaking us and robbing our children of their future, the reason why they do that is so it's easier to control people. And I'm not here for that. It's disrespect of you all and your taxpayer money to the highest degree. So what will happen is that a lot of our colleagues will actively work to do this while we're at work. And then if we say, hey, stop breaking that, they'll say, oh, you're impugning my motives. Yeah, cry harder. Because the thing is that if you are doing something wrong, especially if you are a duly elected official, you should be taken to task. So I will take my colleagues to task for disrespecting you and the money that you pay, and they'll cry and whine about it. But here's the thing, is that I fully expect you all, if you see me put a foot wrong, I want you all taking me to the task. So that's the main thing that I really wanted to say. I'm here for your questions. Like, my speeches are awesome. I can give them to myself in the car all the time. But that's just, it's not here for an ego boost. I'm here to listen to you guys. I yield the rest of my time to you all and your questions. I hope you've got good ones.
Okay, none of my committees are meeting in the interim. Woohoo! The less we are in Topeka, the less damage we do. So that's good. So I have two things that are kind of ruminating on my mind this week. Regarding NAEP scores. If the standard is that you should score 100% on that 100 question math test, which I personally loved very much, how are you to score a 4, which the top level is exceeds expectation? So if perfection is the goal, how are you to exceed that? And that was brought to my attention when I was talking with the teacher this week. Then I've been at a few agriculture things this week, and we all eat, so whether we are directly in agriculture or not, it is important. And these are things I'm hearing that are concerning. We already know the cost of fresh and dry vegetables went up 38% in July. That's a problem for Kansas families. I don't care if you live in Johnson County or elsewhere. I am hearing from producers that due to uncertainty at the federal level. They have lost skilled labor, and so our farmers are having to take on more of those skilled jobs. So instead of just managing and doing everything, now they're also driving the tractor and driving the truck. And, you know, our farmers work hard enough. They don't need to be taking on these extra jobs that could be done by skilled labor that's scared about being here. Other things I'm hearing from agriculture in the federal uncertainty realm is that, you know, you can get grants as agricultural producers for technology to improve your water usage, to improve like cover crops and things like that, to make everything work better, which in theory would lower the price of groceries. And we have producers that are afraid to take these grants because they're reimbursement grants. They're afraid they're going to spend money on a refrigerated truck to get fresh local produce a little further down the road, not be reimbursed, and then be in bankruptcy. So that is a concern. And then, what was my last thing? I'm going to continually gripe about the Kansas legislature killing the farm to food bank program. We had an amazing presentation from a farmer in southeast Kansas about they were growing greens hydroponically, so to sell in retail and then also to sell to the food bank. It was a great kind of closed circuit in one of the poorest parts of the state. The legislator from that state, from that area, who I like a lot and is not there anymore, doesn't like spending any money. So they put in a 1-year sunset. So now a program that was supporting workers in that area and feeding children and adults in that area is gone. So we spend money on tax cuts to big corporations and the ultra wealthy. Didn't ask for it. Well, the ultra wealthy didn't. And we are not spending money on feeding children. And that's a problem to me.
So I have a couple of different special committees that are meeting over the summer, and I think what's important to keep in mind is normally the legislature meets until like mid to late May. We ended in early April this year. Leadership set up the calendar to be very short. They did that for a couple of different reasons. One, if the bills are moving so fast, people can't keep up with them. So then some of their new people will just go ahead and vote along with leadership. That gets a lot of bills to the finish line in a very short period. Additionally, a number of our legislators and leadership knew that they were going to run for higher office. And you cannot collect money in terms of fundraising from PACs or businesses while the legislature is in session. So there was also, by some of our Republican leaders, a desire to get out early so they could start fundraising. So like I said, it strikes me that now there's a lot of interim committees meeting that are picking up a lot of different issues. And a couple of them I'm on, health and social services budget. We've had some meetings there, child welfare oversight. But what I think that you probably really want to keep an eye on is what's coming up. Is it either next week or the week before? The Senate COGE committee is meeting. You know, on the federal level, we have the DOGE committee. On the legislative level, we have the COGE committee. Those are touted as committees, federal and state level, to basically find inefficiencies. But I will tell you what's been happening on both the federal and state level is essentially targeting of programs that help people in our communities, programs that just help our communities in general. And then what we end up seeing too is then people losing jobs behind those programs. So like I said, that's really what those committees have ended up being about. So I would tell you, like I said, keep an eye on that when the meeting, I think is in 2 weeks, where we see a lot of different things come through that committee that aren't necessarily what I would say efficiency related. So lots of things happening there. Other than that, I will tell you, I think Stephanie kind of highlighted this a little bit. We're hearing a lot of the same things across the state at this point in terms of what's on people's minds. And it isn't these culture war issues. The things we're hearing from people are things like worried about access to affordable housing, worried about access to affordable childcare, affordable healthcare. I mean, that's what's on my mind and the issues that I feel we should be taking up. Yet I will tell you, on the healthcare committee this past year, this past session, we were still hearing bills about masking, things related to COVID. And there were a couple of times I even said, what year is this? You know, we're dealing on some of these issues from several years ago. Well, we have other issues that we need to be dealing with. So we're going to keep bringing those issues to the forefront because that's where people are in terms of what's on their minds. So I will go ahead and hand this over to let you all ask questions. Stephanie teed it up and said, I hope you have good ones. So.
She's just our mic runner.
Oh, yeah. Don't ask me first. Yeah, no, don't be afraid of Anna.
First of all, I want to thank y'all for reducing the sales tax. I mean, the state sales tax, that we don't have to, because our bills are a little bit lower. I have a concern about property taxes because I'm over 65, my mother's way over 65, and her house keeps getting assessed higher and higher. And I think part of the problem might be these large corporations buying up all the available housing and paying top prices and either flipping them or using them for rental, which then raises everybody else's property tax. So that's a big issue with me on that. But anyway, fortunately, my mother and I have federal pensions and Social Security, so thankfully we don't have a huge amount of income tax on that. But the property tax is a big issue, and the sales taxes are a big issue for me. So I don't know what can be done or if there's anything.
Yeah, I love talking about taxes.
All
All right. So, no, and thank you for your question. And, you know, the property tax issue is fairly nuanced. We had, part of the reason why you guys did not get property tax relief this last session was a Senate versus House tax committee issue, basically. So on the Senate side, and this kind of sounds good on the surface, on the Senate side, they are pushing, I mean, not all of them, but a very conservative tax chair is pushing a cap on valuations at, I believe, 7 or 7.5%. So on the surface, it's like, okay, this looks good. I don't want my valuations jumping further. You know, I don't know about all of you. I'm experiencing major jumps in valuations, which my mortgage isn't paid off yet. So then that gets rolled into my escrow. All of a sudden, my house payment, now I have to find $300 extra a month in order to do that. A lot of you are dealing with even more. So the cap on valuations at first looks good, but then one of the problems is that will end up trickling down, and not in a good way, to local governments, which will cause them to have to raise your mill levy. So that is, you know, one of the reasons why I didn't support that is that it's like, okay, yeah, your mill levies are going to go up. It's not going to solve the problem, and it will make it more difficult for younger homeowners to move in. If you look up Prop 1 in California, that's why they're having major issues there. Now, on the House side, which, I mean, no offense, Cindy, but we are the superior legislative body. But at least our tax plan is superior. So on the House side, we have the ASTRA plan. And so there used to be a fund called the Local Ad Valorem Tax Fund that would, basically the state would give money to local governments to help them sort of, you know, run their show. That has not been funded, I want to say, since at least 2010. Thanks, Sam. It's amazing how many issues Sam Brownback how much we're still cleaning up after his garbage. It's so frustrating. But in any case, that would have sort of put that funding back in place with some guardrails for local government so they didn't go completely crazy when it came to raising taxes. So I supported that plan. A lot of my local government colleagues not happy with me for that, but honestly, if you are going to get property tax relief through at the state level, you have to give the Republicans a little bit of something to work with. And those controls are not as bad as, say, a tax lid, which again really stifles our local schools, all of our local taxing entities. So those are some of the solutions there. Now, she also mentioned the sales tax on groceries. It is important to note that while you are paying zero state sales tax on groceries, let's think about what groceries are. I can't cook. And so part of the thing is, and plus I'm a busy single mom and a legislator. I've got a lot going on, and so I am a big fan of some of those pre-prepared items. The rotisserie chicken is my friend. You are still paying full taxes on that prepared food, and so I have a bipartisan proposition with one of my colleagues who I think he supports it for nefarious reasons, but I don't care, to get rid of the sales tax on all food. And I think that this actually helps working families more. Now, you are paying sales tax on groceries for your local entities, right? Because a lot of cities, think about the city of Roland Park, they've got that one Walmart up there, and that is one of the main ways that they can generate revenue. So we didn't tell them they couldn't tax that. But sales tax in general is much too high, and part of the reason is that it kept getting ratcheted up to sort of balance out the bottoming out of state funds when income tax got cut. And so who's paying sales tax? You are. Who's not paying sales tax? Wealthy people who aren't necessarily buying stuff in Kansas. So normally I would judge the heck out of anyone who chose to buy things in Missouri as opposed to Kansas, because Missouri is the literal worst. But also, you guys have to save money. And it makes more sense for you to go across the state line and to patronize those merchants because you're not paying as much in sales tax. So we haven't really, I don't know if we will see a lot of things cutting sales tax, because we also have to fund core government. And because we've cut so much income tax, we're going to be going right back into that same thing. So, but in any case, hopefully see the Astra plan pass this next session, because it's an election year. Republicans know they can't get away with not providing you all with property tax relief. So I know also that we want to work with our local government to come up with plans that they find acceptable as well. So, but usually we go in with a big dream. I always walk into a negotiating table asking them for everything and then some, knowing that we have to negotiate it down. So, we will make a lot of sausage there when it comes to tax policy, but I promise you that all of my sausage that I make as a legislator is artisanal and locally sourced.
I take no offense to what she said about the House versus the Senate. I came from the House.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yes, you did. And that's why we love you.
So, two things I want to point out. If the legislature was serious about reducing property taxes, one of the best things that could have been done is fully funding our schools, right? Because when that doesn't happen, then responsibility has to be picked up on the local level. Now, I want to take you back to prior to the 2024 elections. There were a lot of people in those elections who sent out postcards that said property tax relief. I mean, a lot of Republicans running in this area put that promise on the postcards they sent out to voters. Here's what I want you to keep in mind. They have a super majority. If that were a priority, it could have passed like that. What were the priorities though? Removing the 3-day grace period for mail-in ballots. That got across the finish line. The amendment to change the way how Supreme Court justices are selected. That got to the finish line fast. So again, I guess I pin it where it belongs in terms of the fact that, like I said, we have people making claims that property tax relief would be a priority, but that is not what got prioritized this past session. So you have to put pressure on legislators to make sure it happens this year, as Stephanie was talking about, because it is an election year coming up. Sometimes that provides the additional pressure. What else?
We're seeing really scary attacks on public health at the federal level. How is public health faring in Topeka right now?
I'm having a
Thank you.
So yesterday, we were with the county health and environment department. And yesterday, I got an urgent message from a family member, go schedule your COVID shot now. They're pulling off. There are 16 states that CVS is no longer stocking them. So I'm like, and I go online, I don't qualify anymore for a COVID shot. So, I was gonna meet with our public health people, il pronto. I'm like, what are we doing here? And it's very concerning. The legislature is, I would say, anti-public health since the day I got there in 2020. If you don't want a COVID shot, a flu shot, a whatever shot, I don't care. But if I feel those are necessary, because we do work in a cesspool of disease, then I would like that, and I will pay for it. Maybe my insurance would, I don't care. But then it also becomes an equity thing. Like if they're not going to reimburse public health departments for COVID shots for certain people, then it's going to become those who have will get the vaccines they seek that are necessary, maybe even the vaccines to get your kid into school, and those who don't have will be left in compromised health. And so then let's go down that road a little further. When you can't afford shots, immunizations, you can't get your kid into school, so now we have an uneducated person. How are they supposed to grow up to be a full member of society? You get sick, well, you're going to be in the emergency room because you have no primary care. You don't have any money to pay for the emergency room. It's also a very inefficient way to receive care. Expensive as inefficient. And who's going to pay for that? We pay for that. So I don't think it's good. I am going to say I feel encouraged that our public health officials in Johnson County do believe in science. And I also know that many of the professional physician organizations are pushing back on the recommendations from the federal government, and they are issuing their own science-based recommendations. So I'm going to take a deep breath and stop panicking and maybe not go rough up my local pharmacist to see if I can get a COVID vaccine. And I'm going to just hope that the county is going to find a way to carefully weigh nonsense versus science and find a way to at least keep us safe.
Senator, what's your view on that?
We have a lot of attacks on public health in the Senate. And keep in mind, we're elected every 4 years, so the people that are on these committees will be there until 2028. Again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the bills we were hearing this past session still were in regard to masking and issues from the pandemic in general. But now we're at the point too where it's attacks on science and attacks on vaccines. And it's concerning. I mean, my dad used to always tell me, he said, if you repeat something 8 or 9 times, people will start believing it. And we have a lot of groups or individuals who will come to Topeka and repeat these myths and pieces of misinformation over and over again. And I sometimes joke that I'm glad I have an hour's drive home, because then I can call up actual doctors and call up experts in the various fields and say, okay, here's what I'm hearing today. Help me out. Like I said, it's probably good I have that hour drive then to, hear the actual information versus what I hear in Topeka. Because again, as people talked earlier, there are lobbyists working for organizations out there that are not for the good of people. I mean, there are lobbyists there being paid 6 figures to spread misinformation about your schools. And they do it all day long in the Capitol. There are groups and individuals there spreading misinformation about, vaccines and healthcare. Their interests are not lying with the people. So it is still ongoing. I keep telling people, I'm like, we have to make good choices in the next 2 elections. This election coming up and then next year. Because we are in such a precarious position. And I tell people too, you know, while I know we get very excited about presidential elections, again, these state level elections, the legislature, your local elections are so important in terms of the decisions that are being made. And sometimes people will say, well, local elections, I don't pay much attention to that. And I always say, well, I have 2 words for you. Chris Kobach. Kobach started on the local level. Then, you know, a couple of years later, he's running for something else, and then something else, and then all of a sudden he's Secretary of State or Attorney General. That's why local elections are so important. And my message on that is find 5 friends. 5 friends that you can get to vote who haven't usually been voting, or you guys are counting up back there. Okay, 5 other friends not in this room, okay? That you get to go vote. That's what makes a difference, because some of these elections are decided by less than 10 votes.
Yeah.
You know, you got 5 friends you can get to go out and vote. We can change the narrative. We can do that. Anyone else?
Oh, yeah. The guy in the stripes.
Yeah.
You have a comment.
It's like a team effort.
Thank you. I'll make this as brief as possible. And Cindy, actually, I sent some information to you about this, but I have a daughter with a disability, adult, who over the last month, we've been fighting with CanCare on their determination that she was no longer eligible for CanCare or HCBS services. The genesis of that was when I retired. When you are retired, take Social Security, and you have an adult with a disability, her Social Security that she used to get, called SSI, gets flipped to regular old Social Security. I don't know why, but Social Security said, we're gonna flip Sarah. Great, it's fine. So when that happened, CanCare got a notification that she was no longer receiving SSDI or SSI. And they said, she no longer is eligible. Maybe she's not disabled. So we have a letter from Social Security that says she is disabled about 5 times that I present to CanCare, and the poor woman at the call center was like, no, that's not, I don't know the rule, but I don't think that, no, she's not eligible. So fortunately for us, we are smart enough and have the resources to contact a senator, contact somebody at the federal level, contact JCDS, who does great work for disabled folks, and contact our lawyer, who apparently they're afraid of. And now she has been reinstated, but for the period of time, they're like, no, that just doesn't work for us. What I'm trying to say is there's this culture at CanCare trying to politely get people off the rolls. And it's so important, not just for myself, but for all the disabled folks who, we're honest to God, that's how they just get by. They're not buying stuff crazy. You know, if they get to have a Coke at the Quick Trip, my daughter's thrilled, right? So anyway, that's what I'm saying is, please keep your eye out for that, because that is, yeah, it's the least among us. So thank you.
Hi, sorry, I'm going to add to, if you want to make comments on that, I have a question too. I'm Mel Sabin. I'm representing Little Lobbyist Kansas State Chapter, and our kids have disabilities and complex medical needs. And we are on the CanCare calls every couple of weeks. I was just in Topeka for a special session for the legislative budget. And it was held by the Legislative Research Center, and it was appalling. They were looking at the OBBBA and its effects on Kansas, particularly Medicaid, SNAP, and CHIP, were what I was concerned with. They were looking at all the different statutes, and they were all congratulating themselves, patting themselves on the back, because every little single line item was like, oh, Kansas will have little to no impact, but it took none of the nuances or anything else that's happening or state level cuts into consideration. Now we know Hawkins has said publicly that he wants to cut an extra $200 million for Medicaid in Kansas in the 2026 legislative session. But also talking to CanCare, talking to our assessors for, my son's on the TA waiver and he's 5. So, we know for what he's having now that we're looking at cuts, families after us who are similar, like complex needs are looking at not being able to be eligible. I already heard from Britain Development where he goes to school, but also from our MCOs that they are seeing denials for kids that should be on the TA waivers that have G-tubes. So what we're hearing from CanCare is that acuity point systems and all that stuff are not changing. But we know that that's not true just from local testimony. So my question is, first, what can we do better? Because I think when we tell people this is the reality of what's happening, it's falling on deaf ears because they are not seeing it happen yet, or there's so much information or misunderstandings between all these different agencies and people, or those who aren't affected by it not understanding the realities of it, that again, what we're saying and what we're advocating for is not being seen. So how can we get that? How can we fight the disinformation campaign that's happening in the majority better, the supermajority better? But that, so people really understand that what additional cuts will mean for this state, but also for everyone in terms of rising costs and uncompensated care. And also besides, like, what can we do better on the legislative session or a level, we need to get creative, I think, in terms of being able to like back fund the cuts that are happening. Any thoughts on that, or maybe special sessions that could happen, where, again, I think we're all just terrified of what's going to happen. So how do we address that? Thank you.
There's a few names I'm going to mention in terms of committees that are coming up that I want you to contact. One of them is Beverly Gossage. She is the chair of the healthcare committee and some of the interim committees that are looking at this information. And, call daily. I mean, calling once in a while probably doesn't do it. But again, find 5 friends. All of you call daily and remind them that their duty is to us as the people versus their special interest group. So there's Beverly Gossage. Renee Erickson is the chair of the Doge committee, which again, like I said, some of these things are being funneled through there. Sir, you said something earlier about, it just made me think about, if your daughter wants to have a soda. I mean, that was an area of huge contention last year in terms of how benefits can be used. And there was actually a bill saying that if you're receiving SNAP benefits, you can't buy anything sugary. A dessert, a birthday cake for a child. I mean, like I said, there is so much being said in that dome that hurts my heart when I hear it in terms of how some of my fellow legislators characterize people and the demeaning comments and everything. So like I said, I want you calling these people daily. I want you showing up, get in their circle. Because lots of times we have legislators who, they don't know someone affected by this. Again, I encourage you to get in their circle. And then the third person too is Daniel Hawkins. As was mentioned, he is the one who has said, we're going to look to cut $200 million from this. That means people are going to suffer. That means people are going to die, and from what I can tell. Because if we cut these critical programs, I mean, these are lifelines. And, Kansans, we believe in community. We believe in looking out for one another. And I think Americans in general do too. To me, that is not what we're supposed to be doing. We are not supposed to be taking away lifelines from the most vulnerable. So please, like I said, do contact those individuals. And you guys might have some other thoughts too, in terms of some of these committees.
No, I think you said it all. No. I guess I'll just say, if the speaker tells you he's going to target your program, I'd be scared. I've tried to get a mammogram expansion bill through 3 years now, and he has told me he makes the rules. He, in fact, does not. That is not how healthcare works. But if he targets your program, I'd be extremely worried. Also, don't vote for him for insurance commissioner.
This has been a public service announcement.
The more you know.
When I first ran, I didn't even know about the IDD wait list, and I'm knocking on people's doors, and they started telling me about it and saying that there is a 10-year waiting period. Shocked me. I didn't believe it at first. That means that if you graduated from high school at 18 and haven't gone through the process and built up that network of support, it's 28. You're 28 before you really are getting the help that you need. So we've tried over the last couple of years to actually like break into that wait list period, and we've added more support to it. It is a work in progress, and we need to continue to keep doing that every single year to keep chipping away at this.
Wait list for what now?
The IDD, so Intellectual Developmental Disabilities wait list. So there is a support network, counselors, support staff, the counselors to help out help you with your life, with your journey, and give you the support that you need. And yeah, it's supposed to sort of build up over time, but if you get to 18 years of age and you haven't done that outreach beforehand, you're kind of off on your own for the next 10 years as you wait and wait and wait for the support to come to you. It doesn't. And so we absolutely need to do a better job in Kansas of getting that in place. What I would say, you've done a fantastic job reaching out to your network and contacting your representatives. I would say this for anybody else as well, and not just for this particular topic, but if there is something, government is confusing, departments are confusing, and if you are trying to reach somebody within a particular Kansas department and you're not able to do so, you can't get the support or questions asked that you need to, contact your representatives, contact your senators, and say, I am having a problem with this particular Kansas department and I need some assistance. Now, they may not be able to solve the problem that you have, but they will absolutely know who to get in contact with and contact them on your behalf and say, you need to make a connection and help them through this process. And I will tell you, anytime that a constituent has contacted me, I've contacted the various departments. They've been extremely responsive. They've gotten in connection and they've worked the way through the problem. So do that again and again. That's what we're here for.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Quinn Eisenhower. I work for a public health agency, which I will leave as anonymous just to make sure I'm not keeping things professional and political separate. I just wanted to kind of reiterate some points about Medicare and Medicaid stuff that I've heard. I'm by no means a billing, I'm by no means an economist or anything like that, but I will say that we do know that healthcare is predominantly for people who are older and people who are in poverty. They use a lot more resources for the healthcare system, which is why the benefit of Medicaid and Medicare is so fundamental to help fund a lot of public health. And so other than the direct impacts of having just the people who are using Medicare and Medicaid to be taken away the funding for their ability to receive care, you have to remember that if we take away this funding, that cost then directly goes on to everybody else significantly to help subsidize. And I'm sorry, excuse me. I'm sure you guys are all probably aware of that, or if you haven't, I would really highly advise that we can get that word out to the public that, younger people like myself, because I'm 23 years old, believe it or not. But that is a bill that I'm going to be paying for a long period of my time. It's already partially subsidizing because Medicare and Medicaid cost reimbursements are hard, but if we continue to slash that, that's going to directly impact a further financial burden onto younger people. So I think reiterating that paying a little bit in tax now does actually substantially save us a lot of money in the future, and just kind of getting that clear across to people is super important, because unlike most other things, health is not a resource that we can determine whether or not we want to purchase or not. If you break your leg, if you have a heart attack, you have to receive care. And there's a lot of times that there are some circumstances you can get yourself into, significant head injuries, whatnot, where you don't have the right to refuse care. You actually lose your rights so that you have to go to the hospital. Overall, the philosophy is good to make sure that you are getting care. But I think that is something that we could be hammering a little bit more, especially the younger voters. to reiterate the fact that this small, or the relative proportion that we're paying for Medicare and Medicaid, do have an outstanding effect to save us money in the long run. Thank you.
All right, we are at the end of our time. Oh, Jennifer.
I'm so sorry, can you just talk about redistricting? Or
Oh, yes.
I don't wanna.
Yes.
All right, so, and I meant to talk about redistricting when I initially spoke, but I got too mad about taxes and so I forgot. So I was on, usually what happens is that legislative redistricting, Kansas is one of the states that has partisan redistricting. And so whatever party is in control of the legislature draws the maps because that's fair and reasonable. It's not. We don't want to politicize that because you don't want me choosing the boundaries because I know exactly what I want my district to look like. We should not be a part of this, but yet we are. So what happens is that every 10 years we have the census. Then we get that information and we have to redraw our district lines both for legislative, for a state house, for state senate and state school board is sort of linked together. And then our congressional districts. So Kansas, with our population, we still get 4 congressional districts. When our redistricting took place, we have some of the most gerrymandered maps I have ever seen. I was a member of the redistricting committee, and when they passed out the maps that became the maps that we have now, I started laughing. Because I was like, you guys, you're not really, and yes, that turned out being what we have. So a lot of you have heard redistricting in the news because, again, how there's that kid that likes to change the rules in the middle of the game because they're losing and like everyone hates that crybaby. Well, guess what? That's who's in charge at the federal level. So the maps got gerrymandered sort of in the middle of what would normally be a 10-year cycle. In Texas, we're hearing California is going to try to put a vote to the people to change it so that they can do that again. We're hearing across the state line in Missouri how the governor, has probably been told by, the DC, and no one likes doing DC politics, to basically rig the game in the favor of the Republicans by splitting Kansas City in half to get Emanuel Cleaver out of office. Now, there might be a slight chance that this occurs in Kansas. I have been hearing rumors that the Senate President, Ty Masterson, who's running for governor, we're going to have a lot of Republicans who are running for governor who are going to be falling all over themselves to kiss up to the president to get that coveted Trump endorsement. It's a sad state of affairs when that endorsement is coveted, but yet here we are. And so there might be a slight chance that redistricting would be brought up during regular session. I doubt that we are going to have a special session because there are 2 ways a special session is convened. Number 1, by the governor doing it. We're never supposed to speak about what we think she'll do, but I'm going to hazard a guess she's not in favor of redistricting. I think I can surmise that here. The other way that we call a special session is you have to have majorities or supermajorities on both sides of the House and Senate voting or writing a letter to call a special session. We had one like that was the anti-vaxxer Thanksgiving special session in 2020. And so that has happened before. I find it highly unlikely that there will be enough Republicans on the House side to do that because we do still have some of our moderate Republican friends who I don't think are really interested in that. And Speaker Hawkins, at least at this point, does not appear interested in that. Now, could we see maps proposed when we go into regular session? Yeah, they can do that. They have supermajorities on both sides. But here's the thing, is that redistricting is like making a souffle. Remember how I told you guys I was a terrible cook? A souffle is very delicate. If your humidity's wrong, if you look at it the wrong way, if you walk across the kitchen in the wrong way, that thing's gonna fall. And right now, our maps are already so gerrymandered that it's okay, you wanna go back and take a second look? Bring it. Because then, if they make any changes, that puts the 2nd congressional district in danger of potentially being lost to a Democrat. So I would not hate that, but I bet that they would. And so again, it's such a delicate balance that they can try and it'll be cute, but I do not think that our congressional maps could get any worse. I think so I think that we're really not in danger of that, basically, long story long. So I know you're hearing a lot about it at the national level. I don't think it's going to be a Kansas thing.
Well, and didn't they already figure out that it did work trying to gerrymander Cherie's out?
Yeah, they tried. It was adorable how they tried, but yeah, as it turns out, people in Franklin County and Miami County and Lynn County also want a representative that respects them. It's this whole thing. So.
Wow. All right. Again, thank you all for being here. We'll be for a few minutes. Some of us will, if you have questions we didn't get to, but again, thanks for being here. Enjoy your weekend.
Okay.
Okay.